Started. Welcome to Daily Power Parsha. Well, a formal welcome to DPP. Today is February 8th, 2021. It is a lovely Monday morning Monday afternoon here in Atlanta. Looks fairly sunny outside. A little brisk, but that's to be expected for February. All right, I'm going to share my screen. We are going to jump in. Torah portion this week. We have a brand new one. Is Mishpatim. Now, Mishpatim. Ooh, look at that fancy imagery on the front page. All right, Mishpatim means laws. Okay, there are three types of mitzvot. I'm going to stop sharing just as soon as that happened. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, there are three types of mitzvot. You ready? Of the 613, there are different ways you can slice it. You can categorize mitzvot as, those that teach us about our conduct between our fellow human beings versus mitzvot that govern our conduct between us and God. So that's one way to divide the mitzvot. Some speak about interpersonal relationships and some speak about our divine relationship. That's one way. Another way is you could say, well, there's different types of mitzvot. Some are positive mitzvot, the do mitzvot, things we should do. And then there are the negative mitzvot, not like they're sad, but negative in the sense that they are the do nots. Do not do this, do not do that, which we saw last week in the 10 Commandments. Some of them were honor your parents, observe the Shabbat, etc. And some were do not murder, do not steal, do not whatever. So there's do's and do nots. That's another way of dividing mitzvot. I'll give you another way. And that's the way we're going to focus on today. And that is different sensibilities of mitzvot. There are Mishpatim, Eidos, and Chukim. Mishpatim, Eidos, and Chukim. Mishpatim, which is the name of this Torah portion, are those mitzvot that are highly logical, highly rational. They make a lot of sense. And as the Talmud says, some of these laws, theoretically, even if Torah would not have put them in, societies could have theoretically evolved to understand these on their own because they make sense. They are ethical, moral, rational laws. That's category one, called Mishpatim. Eidos are the types of mitzvot, this is category two. Types of mitzvot that are not logical, not rational, nothing that you and I would have necessarily come up with on our own, but once we have the mitzvah, it makes a lot of sense. So it's not something necessarily intuitive, but it's something that in retrospect, or once we have it, it's like, yeah, it makes sense. And these are typically the mitzvot. This category refers specifically or typically to mitzvot that symbolize national or historic events. Let me make it very simple. Passover, the Passover Seder. Yeah, it's not the same as do not kill, do not steal. Those are like highly logical for moral people, highly logical. Passover Seder to eat matzah is not necessarily something that you and I would have intuitively come up with. But once we have the mitzvah, it makes sense. It makes sense. It's like a throwback, trying to like taste the food that they tasted then and bitter herbs to get us filled with empathy, right? The Seder makes sense once we have it, and it bears testimony. Hence, they're called eidos, which means testimonials. These are mitzvot that bear testimony to some sort of event or symbol or Jewish ideal that, again, is not humanistically logical, rational, but Jewish. It makes sense based on our history and the symbols that we believe in. Does that make sense, what I just said?
How do you spell those two, please?
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to put it in the Hebrew in the old chat box. That's the easiest way to do this. We have Mishpatim. Then we have Eidos and Chukim, which we have not spoken about yet, which we will get to in a moment. All right? Mishpatim, Eidos, and Chukim. Mishpatim are the highly logical ones, rational ones, make sense. Eidos are the ones that, well, we wouldn't have known if we weren't told, but once we were told, yeah, it makes sense. And these are, again, typically the ones that bear witness or testimony to historic event or Jewish fundamental belief. And chukim, category 3, those are the mitzvot that once we got them, even after we got them, and we study them, they still make no sense. They're not logical. Go wrap your head around not mixing meat or milk. And I know people have said benefits or whatever, alleged benefits for it. Who knows? It's a chok, right? Don't mix wool and linen, right? It's a faux pas, fashion faux pas. Why? Who knows? I want to bring you in on the latest scandal in the halachic world as of, right before the pandemic. This was the big thing everyone was talking about. You ready? I'm going to drop a word on you that you were not expecting to hear in DPP. I guarantee it. This is like a prop bet. Guaranteed. You did not expect to hear this word today at DPP on Monday, February 8th. You ready? Here's the word. Uggs. I knew it. Told you, you were not expecting to hear Uggs. Uggs, the footwear company that makes fluffy boots and, whatever. And there's various opinions as to how the aesthetic, if it looks good or not good, which is not my field of expertise. But here's what I will tell you. A lot of Uggs have natural wool linings. The fluff is not synthetic. It's like you're stepping on a lamb. Oh, so sorry. Oh, no, it's okay. There's no lamb actually underneath, even though it feels very fluffy. But according to Shatnez Laboratories, which is a thing, Shatnez means the mixture of wool and linen. Laboratories means places that study things. There are Shatnez Laboratories in major Jewish communities like New York, obviously, Baltimore, Chicago, etc., even in Atlanta. Rabbi Asa in Toko will take your garments and check in his own mini laboratory at Beth Jacob on La Vista Road, right there in Toko Thrills. He will check your garments for Shatnez in his little lab, which means he will check for wool and linen. So Uggs were found, many styles of Uggs, that underneath the wool, whoa, hey there, look at that. Underneath the wool insert was a patch of linen. Oh, hey, throw me those. Shia is not feeling well today, so he is home with me, but he is my lovely assistant to show me a pair of non-Uggs. These are, this is Max and Jack. Yeah, not Uggs, right? This is what we call nugs, not Uggs. This is not a real thing, but for illustration purposes only, it works, right? This is kind of fluffy insole situation. But imagine, and this one does not come out, but Uggs do because, it's Uggs and why not? It's cool, things come apart. It just, it's like jackets with the buttons that actually have a button thing. You know what I'm talking about? Right? The jacket buttons, I think this one actually also does that. Not that it's fancy, but whatever. It also has an actual hole, just in case you want to button your jacket with the sleeves. I'm digressing a lot. Here's my point. In Uggs, they were found to have like sections of linen behind the wool, which made it a Jewish no-no. So there you have people. Thank you, Shia. Shuck that shoe at you. Hey, nice guy. So there you have Jews who are buying Uggs, because for whatever reason they're buying Uggs. And meanwhile, it's like, nope, can't buy the Uggs. That's not kosher. And then you'll ask, well, who cares? Wool and linen. So what's being harmed in the process? Welcome to the wild world of chukim. That's a chok. We don't know why. The Torah says don't mix wool and linen in any of your clothing or footwear. So we don't. By the way, it's a big controversy today, and feel free to Google Shatnez or halacha, Uggs. You'll fall down a rabbit hole quickly. There are laboratories that say no good, 6 styles. There's some that say, oh, it's fine. We've never found any. I'm not weighing in on it. I'm just saying this was a big brouhaha winter of 2020, right before pandemic. Anyway, back to the story. At this point, no one wears Uggs anyway. Everyone's wearing Crocs. I'm kidding. I'm sure it's still out there. It's still a question, but I'm not the one to resolve it. It's not my expertise. My point is, this is an example of the third category of mitzvot. Mishpatim, logical, super logical ones, make sense, totally understandable, get it. Eidos, testimonials. It's kind of like, lahavdil. I don't want to draw a perfect parallel, but in America, we also have holidays or observances that commemorate certain things. The average human being that's not an American wouldn't necessarily have come up with that observance. But it's in our culture because it makes sense. So that's the second category. Eidos, the mitzvot that bear testimony. Another example of that, by the way, would be tefillin. We put tefillin on our arms to remind ourselves of the Exodus, of creation, various reasons why we do it. So it's not something that, oh yeah, it makes sense. But everyone should be putting on tefillin. It makes logical sense. It's not like do not steal level of logic, but once you have it and it's tied to a certain event and there's a logical inference, it makes sense. It bears testimony, eidos to something or other. And then the third category, again, chukim, even after you got it, you studied it, you observe it, ask me why, I will tell you I have no idea. I mean, one could come up with ideas, but it's not a direct, it's a guess, and it's not necessarily the reason. All right, so this week's Torah portion is called Mishpatim, which is category 1 of the mitzvot. And it primarily deals with the mitzvot that are very logical. And it's interesting because after this follows immediately right after the Torah portion, Yitro, last week's Torah portion, in which we read about the revelation at Sinai and the big spectacle that happened with the lightning and the thunder and the smoking mountain and the voice of God and the trepidation and the trembling and all of the awe and wonder of that moment. And immediately following that, we have basic fundamental laws, how to be a mensch, even the things that maybe we think the Torah didn't have to tell us because we would have known it on our own, it's still told to us. And now I want to share with you the Rebbe's insight on that. Why that Mishpatim follows immediately after Sinai, after the story of Sinai. It's to tell us that when we observe one of the category 1 mitzvah, Mishpatim, we should also do it not just because it's logical, but because Hashem gave us the mitzvah unconditionally. The Rebbe said that a society that bases their moral compass, completely on their own understanding will eventually come to twist it and distort it and circumvent it. The Rebbe said, I spent time in the 1930s in Berlin. The Rebbe studied at the University of Berlin. You probably know where I'm going with this, right? The Rebbe said, I studied in Berlin and I saw firsthand how sophisticated and bright and knowledgeable the Germans were. When your value of do not kill, do not murder, when that value is not based on a higher value that transcends your understanding of it, if it's based solely on the way you interpret it, or if it's based on your own, I decided that it's not right, so I'm not going to do it. The moment you decide it is right, you will do it. Are you with me? If you created it, you can break it. Or if you decided it, you can undecide it. You can make an exception. So yeah, killing is not okay unless the people we're talking about are X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. That's where the twist comes in. But when you accept, even for the Mishpatim, that they are given to us from above at Sinai, if you will, right? They're divinely originating. It's not mine to create. It's not mine to rationalize. It's not mine to break. Then we feel, then we submit to it, and we don't allow ourselves to make exceptions. Now, does that mean that no one ever broke the law? Believing in Torah, no one ever did something wrong? Of course, because we're human. But it's not an intellectual campaign where you can say this makes sense and it's logical, and you know what? There's no contradiction here, right? You can't say that. You know at least that you're doing something you shouldn't. But in the first model, where the reason why you're doing it is because you decided to do it, well, you decide not to do it. And there's nothing wrong. There's no inconsistency because you've defined it in your way, because it's all based in your definition anyway. Therefore, it's important. Torah emphasizes here, with the juxtaposition of last week's Torah portion, God giving us the Torah at Sinai, and this week's Torah portion, the logical mitzvot, the juxtaposition teaches us, as the Rebbe explains, that even the logical mitzvot should not be done based on logic, but should be done based on God. divine instruction. Does that make sense what I just said? Yes? Okay. With that, I think it's high time to jump in to the text. Okay, reading number 1, verse 1, chapter 21. And these are the ordinances. That means Mishpatim, the laws, ordinances. All right. These are the logical laws that you shall set before them. The first law has to do with slavery. It's interesting. Slavery, we've talked about this many times. Slavery in Torah is not the slavery that we abolish, find abhorrent, etc. It's more of it's like working for someone, staying in their home and whatever. You have to take care of your slave. So again, it's the wrong word in English. It conjures up a different type of reality. A slave in Jewish law is treated as a member of the family, and someone who's, if you have only one pillow, it goes to that person. It's basically a worker who is in your home and working for you full time. Should you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall work for 6 years. In the 7th year, he shall go out to freedom without charge. There you go. There you have it. So what this says is, even in a situation of somebody who, for whatever reason, to pay off a debt or otherwise, needs to kind of work in that type of level, that type of intensity, not intensity, but that type of dynamic, kind of full time, kind of move in, should only be for 6 years. Here we see the value the Torah ascribes to freedom, right? There should always, it's not about what you want or what they want. After 6 years, they're done. Human being needs to be free. Human being needs to have their own life, their own home, their own family, their own space, not with someone. Got to have your own thing. If he comes in alone, he shall go out alone. If he is a married man, his wife shall go out with him. In other words, you can't, none of the family stays behind. Everyone comes in together, goes out together. That's it. So if this fellow is working for you, but he has a wife and a kid, and they all move in together in the guest house, whatever it is, everyone, after 6 years, everyone moves out, and that's it.
Rabbi.
Right. If his master gives him, yeah, Ray, go ahead.
Okay, is this the situation where the slave doesn't want to leave? Is this where they poke a hole in his ear or something like that?
Stay tuned. Verse number 6. Yes, we got a few verses. Yes, hold on. Hold that thought. Take a look at this. Take a look at this. If his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, the woman and her children shall belong to her master, and he shall go out alone. So here's a different situation. Here's a different situation where he wasn't married when he came in, but he was given, I guess, another worker, if you will, to have children. Then it's a bit of a different arrangement because it's not his wife that he brought into the situation. So they have their own calculation with the household. Fine. Belong to the master, again, it's not belonging. It's the idea of it's not his wife fully, etc. But if the slave says, and this is what Ray was referring to, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go free. In other words, I want to stay right here where I am. So, in other words, the person does not want to embrace their own Torah mandated freedom. So his master shall bring him to the judges, and he shall bring him to the door or to the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him forever. So basically, I'm laughing because it sounds much more dramatic than it is. He basically pierced the ear, and that's done for the person who does not want to embrace their own freedom. And as the commentators explain, I believe it's Rashi right here on the page. Rashi says, "Why do you make a hole in the ear? Like for an earring type thing situation. It's to indicate that the ear that was at Sinai, that basically heard God say, 'You shall not have any other masters other than me.' That person who says, 'No, I want to commit to another human being and be all about them,' that person's not listening to God. God said human beings should not serve other human beings, that a human being should only be in the service of God, and that's it. In other words, we should live higher lives and not serve human masters or human beings. Yeah, we all need to work for a living, more or less, and we all have to work, and on some level we have to, put ourselves to and for others, but not in a way that's like completely submissive, completely subjugated. And even an extreme case, which is what we're talking about, where somebody has incredible amounts of debt, which is the way our sages explain this, and they really need to work for that person full-time to pay it off and get back, then the point is to pay it off and get back and resume life. If the person says, I don't want to resume normal life, I want to stay like this, head down, working for someone, all in, and that's it, 24/7. I mean, whatever, not 24/7, literally, but in that context, that person's not listening to God. So there's a sign with the piercing in the ear. Oh, and then it says, and after that, you can't force someone out. You shall serve him forever, but that's not even forever. Forever means until the Jubilee year. I think we spoke about the Jubilee year in a recent class. Every 50 years was called the Yovel, the Jubilee year, and homes got. I spoke about it in a different class for a different lunch and learn group. Whatever. I do. Some of you may know I do a lunch and learn for Coca-Cola. So for people there, so that's where we did this. But anyway, Yovel forever. Yovel, is the Jubilee year every 50 years. Land ownership resets, and as well with this case, the person, even if they wanted to, on the 50th year of that cycle, and it's not 50 years from when they start working for that other person, but it's an objective 50-year cycle. The person might have started working in year 48. 2 years later, either way, he's done. So it's, even though it's not been six years or 7 years or 50 years, on that 50th year, it's done. And if a person, in year 40 started working for somebody like in this arrangement, so again, after a few years, they should go free. They should go back to their own life, their own home, their own family, etc. 1 second. If they choose not to, either way, within 10 years or at 10 years, at that 50th year, they will be, whether they like it or not, they're on their own. Okay. Now, if a man sells his daughter as a maidservant, she shall not go free as the slaves go free. Let's see what that means. Let's see what Rashi says on this. All right, way too long, Rashi, to quickly parse. What is my understanding of this? I don't know. I got to look up the commentaries, but it looks a little bit too long to parse right now. Maybe the Torah explains. Let's see. If she is displeasing to her master, who did not designate her for himself, then he shall enable her to be redeemed. He shall not rule over her to sell her to another person when he betrays her. Okay, so it sounds like to me there's some sort of marriage clause here, where theoretically she could marry the guy who she's working for, or if not, he is not allowed to offer her to marry to somebody else. And if he designates her for his son, right? So if he doesn't want to marry her, but his son wants to marry her, then he shall deal with her according to the laws of the daughters of Israel. In other words, it's a normal marriage, and that's it. So she's no longer a maidservant. She is now a daughter-in-law, and that's it. And if he takes another wife for himself, so let's say he marries her, this maidservant, he cannot, again, in biblical law, it's not practiced. In biblical law, theoretically, a person could have more than one wife. So if he takes another wife for himself, the Torah says, he shall not diminish her sustenance, her clothing, or her marital relations. So that means that even if there's another spouse, another wife, one is not allowed to in any way neglect the first wife. So not diminishing the sustenance, clothing, or marital relations. And this becomes actually in a very interesting way, and this kind of, I'll just be honest, and it's a bit of a strange context about a maidservant, a father. I guess I'm assuming that the family is impoverished and the family has to go to work. So the daughter goes to work for somebody. Then there's a marriage clause, but if she's married, then she becomes part of the family. Now we're talking about a scenario where he takes a second wife on top of this first one who came into the family by being a maidservant. And the point of the Torah is she still retains her status as a wife and in no other secondary role. That's the protection that the Torah is giving. But in a very kind of roundabout way, the Torah is also telling us about a husband's obligations to a wife in marriage in general. So again, I know it's a very strange context that we don't relate to today. But after all of this is said and done, we do have these three things that I've left highlighted on the page that remain obligations from husband to wife that are actually written up in the ketubah. If you want to know what the original marriage document of the ketubah says in Aramaic, it talks about the husband's obligations to the wife, and it includes these three things that are of biblical origin. Basically, sustenance means taking care, providing for food, life sustenance. Clothing refers to clothing and jewelry. Husband's obligations to make sure that his wife is adorned and whatever she needs as far as clothing. And Donna, I saw the thumbs up. Jewelry, exactly. So again, sustenance is basic sustenance, right? He said clothing is next level adornment, and that would include all sorts of, I don't know what the name for the category is, but things above and beyond basic needs. And in a very progressive, I believe, stance, the Torah says, dating back 3,300 years, it's a husband's obligations to provide marital relations. And that, again, is in the ketubah. It's an obligation from husband to wife, not from wife to husband, but from husband to wife, which I don't know that I want to focus on this now. I don't think now is the right context for this conversation, but it is a very progressive view that Torah has on the nature of a relationship. Again, as we would say in Hebrew scholarly writing, Ein kan makim laharach. Now is not the time to elaborate on this, but again, think about it and you can ponder it. In ancient times, where certainly women were not given, when I say certainly, I don't believe in many societies in ancient times, certainly not 3,300 years ago, women were given rights. I'm pretty sure men held all the rights, and specifically in this third category. Anyway, the point is that Torah says that it's the husband's obligation. The Torah does not, I don't recall the Torah outlining specific obligations from wife to husband. Obviously, there's, love and commitment and whatever, but specific obligations are from husband to wife. And that is why, as you might know, the original ketubah document, the traditional Aramaic ketubah document, does not talk about a mutual commitments. It doesn't. It's strictly the commitment from husband to wife, because that's what the Torah talks about. Yes, there is also a commitment from wife to husband, of course, not letting, and not saying that marriage is completely one-sided, that the husband is only, but that's the commitments that are outlined in Torah are these commitments from husband to wife and are not specified the other way around. I know there's a modern trend, English ketubot and whatnot that talk about, it's kind of like written vows, if you will, and both parties are pledging whatever. There's something actually beautiful about the Torah's formulation of this, and really kind of reorienting our understanding of dynamics in relationships, but also respect in relationships. And again, we could speak a lot about this, but hopefully I'm putting enough pieces where it's making sense. All right, let's continue. And if he does,
I'll show you. I have both.
Oh, nice.
I have the traditional and English. Yeah.
Oh, look at that. Nice. I wonder if the English also, there's different Englishes, right? So
the English is not the translation of the traditional. Here.
Sometimes the English is more of a translation. Sometimes it's more of a kind of a general commitment both sides, which is important, by the way. I'm not diminishing that. I just find it interesting that in a world that so often has positioned marriage as a wife serving her husband, maybe I'll speak a little bit more clearly. In even not that far back, I'm pretty sure a few decades ago, the role of marriage, I think, was seen, the dynamic was the wife should serve the husband, right, in various ways, etc. And it's interesting that here we have our original document, our original legal document, the Torah, going back 3,300 years. It's a long time. That does not blink an eye, bat an eye, and say, no, I don't know what you're talking about. The obligation is clearly from husband to wife. And this is a case where the wife is a wife that originally starts off as a maidservant, the father, which is a very, I don't know, it's like a very, it's the right word for different scenario, or maybe, vulnerable scenario, right? She starts off working, right? Daughter, I don't know how old she is in this context, but she's not married. She's under the auspice. She's still, within her family, her parents, legal, whatever. So she starts working, and then gets married. And still, again, even in that situation, that's why the Torah is saying, even in this situation, the obligation doesn't change. Anyway, and if he does not do these three things for her, look at that. She shall go free without charge, without payment of money. In other words, that's it. She's done. She's out. And you can't say, oh, she's leaving, or she shouldn't have left, or whatever it is. No, she's legally allowed to leave. And again, by the way, this is true today in all Jewish marriages. The Ketubah says it's an obligation that the husband provide for the wife. And if not, it's a violation of the commitment, of the commitment, of the contract. I have to mention something else. I want to stop sharing for a second to see everybody about Ketubah. The Ketubah document is one of the most important documents within a Jewish wedding, marriage, ceremony, context, whatever. It's so important. That's why it's written up before the chuppah and it's read under the chuppah traditionally. It's really important, not for the husband. Jewish law seeks to make sure that the wife's interests and needs and rights, etc., are protected within this marriage. That no husband can turn around and say, no, I don't need to. No, no, she needs to do this for me. I don't need to. No, that's not what, there's an obligation from husband to wife. That's it, done. To the point, listen to this. This probably will shock you. According to halacha, the wife should always know where her ketubah is as protection for her. Listen to this. If it goes missing, if for some reason we can't find it, I'm not sure where it is, whatever, Jewish law says the husband and wife should not live under the same roof until you write up a new one, until you find a new one. Why? Because we don't want to ever leave the wife unprotected. So if can't find the ketubah, husband has to find a couch. Just okay, whatever. There's ways to, as you probably imagine, there's ways to, figure it out quickly and make it work. But that's the extent to which halacha protects the interests, rights, safety, security, whatever, everything of the wife, and not leave her in a vulnerable situation. Because otherwise the husband can say, oh no, I've got it. And then, not actually have it. And then say, well, I don't know where it is or whatever it is. And not when it's needed to, somehow it's gone and there's no trace of it. If there's no ketubah, that's it. Don't come back until you give her the ketubah. That's kind of what the message is.
So anyway. In other words, is that like a form of legal separation?
No, it's not really. It's not.
Could hide the body, and then I need to hide this ketubah for us.
No. It's not like legal separation. It's basically highlighting how important it is that the ketubah be there. So if a rabbi is called in and they're working on writing a new one or finding it, whatever it is, again, there are ways to make it work, and it doesn't have to be so dramatic and official and whatever. But the point is, it's super important to know where the ketubah is. That's why many people frame it and put it on the wall. It's that way you know where it is. Number one, right? You know where it is. And no, I mean, literally, that's why people do that, because it's such an important thing to have as a safety. It's not for the husband. That's my point. My whole point here is not for the husband. It's for the wife, and Jewish law really cares about protecting the rights, interests, etc. of the wife. Yeah, Donna.
Right, so along with the obligation, including adornment, and you mentioned jewelry, so I just found that along with manna coming from heaven was precious stones and jewelry for the women.
Yes. I forgot to mention that. There is a tradition that says that there were also jewels and gems that came down. And I don't know why maybe we talked about this before, but as you were saying that, it triggered another thing. It says in Jewish law, in the Code of Jewish law, that before Yom Tov, before holidays, husbands should buy their wives jewelry and clothing, right? As part of this obligation. So when do you do it? At the beginning of marriage? Annually? 5 years? Halacha has to be codified. It has to have a framework around like what are the parameters of the clothing jewelry obligation? So the way halacha says is the ideal is before every Yom Tov. Not before every Shabbos, okay, maybe flowers, but before every Yom Tov, which is for a Jewish holiday. So I think it's appropriate to mention that we have opportunities now before Purim and Passover to get some new Jewish jewelry just in time. Anyway, so if it's for you,
Rabbi,
great.
isn't it interesting that so jewelry is elevated and it's not considered frivolous, but it's important for the emotional well-being of the woman?
For sure. And not only that, there's another tradition that tells us that, and this, we may have spoken about this when they were collecting donations to build the tabernacle. And the Jewish women brought their mirrors. And Moses said, I don't want mirrors are like vanity. It's the opposite of a holy temple. We're trying to build a place for God, and you're bringing mirrors about, beauty and superficiality. And Hashem said, take the mirrors. It wasn't glass, it was copper mirrors. Take the mirrors. They are the most precious gift of all. And one of the explanations of why it was so precious is that these were the same mirrors that the women used in Egypt to keep the Jewish people going physically, biologically. Let me explain. When the men were working as slaves all day, they came home at night and were physically exhausted and tired. And there was a danger to the perpetuation of the Jewish nation in the sense that procreative activities were not happening. So it says, the Talmud says, the Medrash says, the Jewish women would go ahead, they would pull out their mirrors, and they would start adorning themselves with jewelry, and they would call their husbands and say, who I look more beautiful than you. Like they would start, having conversations about beauty and everything with it. And one thing led to the next, and one generation led to the next. And that's how the Jewish people throughout those years of slavery kept going. So God said to Moses, you think these mirrors are for frivolous vanity? These created the Tzivos Hashem, the legions of Jews, right? The army of the Jewish people that marched out of Egypt. Those children are here because of those mirrors. Those are holy mirrors. So take them. And those mirrors, the conflict.
That's why the jewelry came down with the manna then.
Could be also as kind of a reward for that. It might be. I don't know that I've seen it connected, but it would be interesting to look that up and see if there's a connection drawn. I will say that the copper mirrors were in turn used for the kiyar, the wash basin. The priests, before they began their service, every day in the temple, the priests did the service. In the morning, they would wash their hands and feet from a special, beautiful wash basin that was made of those very the copper from the mirrors that the women used, which means that it is the very foundation of divine service were these mirrors. Anyway, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
But it's also, though, for the personal, emotional well-being of the woman, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for happiness,
for
joy. So there's different levels, right? If you want to break it down, and this is, this would be for, the intimacy conversation, or I don't know, whatever, a relationship conversation, but it's about there's essential needs there are emotional needs, right? So there's like essential needs, there's emotional needs, and then there's physical needs, right? So you got all three covered here, again, on different levels with these three obligations. All right.
Thank you.
Let's jump back in. Yeah, pleasure, of course. All right, here we go. One who strikes a man. Now we're moving to another law. One who strikes a man so that he dies shall surely be put to death. Oh, yeah, this is like the source of the death penalty in Torah law. One who strikes a man so that he dies. This is talking about intentional and premeditated murder, shall surely be put to death. By the way, that doesn't mean that capital punishment was very common at all, as anyone that's taken the Jewish legal courses with me knows, and we had one of not that long ago, crime and consequence. Crime and consequence or consequences, whatever, where we spoke about the burden of proof to convict someone of a capital crime in Jewish law is very strong. You have to know that it's one who strikes a man. There's a lot of details in that. I mean, it's very simplified in this verse, but you have to know, was that the one, right? Did they do the striking, right? How do you know that that's the one? Do we have witness testimony, right? So the burden of proof is very high, but theoretically there is capital punishment in Jewish law. But one who did not stalk him, it wasn't premeditated, but God brought it about into his hand. It was an accident. Classic example is the fellow who is chopping wood, and as he's swinging the axe, the blade flies off from the handle and strikes the other guy. So we talked about this in Deuteronomy when these laws were repeated by Moses before his death. So in that case, God says, "I will make a place for you to which he shall flee." There's going to be cities of refuge where the unintentional murderer can escape and kind of atone or whatever it is for that. But it's not a capital crime because it wasn't premeditated, it wasn't intentional, it wasn't murder, it was, I don't know the language in American law, what you would call it, manslaughter, whatever the language is, I'm not sure, but it's not intentional, deliberate, premeditated murder. It's another case. Took a life though, so it's not like just life goes on, goes to this exile, but it's a different consequence. But circling back to the original scenario, but if a man plots deliberately against his friend to slay him with cunning, right? Then even from my altar you shall take him to die. What does it mean even for, oh, there's a meaning of that, even from my altar. Let's see what that is. Even from my altar. Oh, wow. If you were a Kohen and wanted to perform the sacrificial service, you shall take him to die. Okay. I guess even a Kohen faces capital punishment. I would think that would be obvious, like no exceptions. There's got to be another layer to that. I don't recall that right now. Even from my altar, you shall take him to die. I don't know. I feel like there's another layer of meaning there that I'm forgetting, but it is what it is. The point is, intentional murder, etc., capital punishment, not all. If the proof is there, if we know for sure, etc. Otherwise, exile for unintentional murder. Next. Verse 15, and one who strikes his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. And whoever kidnaps a man and sells him, human trafficking, and he's found in his possession, shall surely be put to death. And one who curses his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. And if men quarrel, and one strikes the other with a stone or with a fist, and he does not die, but is confined to his bed. This is a classic case of not murder, but injury, right? Somebody's fighting and strikes the other guy, and now the person is injured and, in bed, sick or recovering. So if he gets up and walks about outside on his support, in other words, if he ultimately recovers and survives, the assailant shall be cleared of the capital crime because he didn't die. He shall give only payment for his enforced idleness, and he shall provide for his cure. So it's not a capital punishment, but there is a monetary payment that needs to be made. Number one, for the idleness, and number two, for his cure. Let me explain and elaborate. In fact, from these verses, our sages in the Talmud actually derive 5 different payments for injury, causing someone else bodily harm and injury. Nezek, tsar, ripoy, sheves, and boshes. Nezek means damage. You got to pay for the damage that was incurred. Tsar means pain. You got to pay for the pain. In other words, nezek means there's an amount, let's say, okay, I'm going to share with you something like a little bit weird to think about, but it is what it is. So imagine you ask somebody, how much would you need to be paid in order to undergo that damage? Are you with me what I just said? Does that make sense what I just said? Sort of, yeah. Like to be punched in the stomach, right? How much would you, how do I phrase this? How much would you take to let me do that? Does that make sense? Yeah. Nezek means there's a certain calculation for the damage, how much the damage itself is worth. Not medical bills, but how much the damage itself is worth. That's nezek. Tsar means you have to assess the pain. How much pain was that person in from that? So there's the actual damage that was inflicted, bodily harm. Then there's the pain, the suffering, like the pain of that harm, which is calculated through some other calculus. Nezek, tsar, ripoy, medical bills, that was included in the provide for his cure, means you got to pay the medical bills, right? If you hurt somebody. Sheves is idleness, which was also mentioned in the verse, lost wages. That person can't work, so you've got to pay for the lost wages. And boshes means embarrassment. Like having been beaten up by somebody is embarrassing, which I think there would be like pain. So there's like pain and then suffering, two different categories. So there's tsar, which is the pain, and then the boshes, which is like the embarrassment, which is the humiliation, which is like the suffering on top of the pain. It's like different category. So the 5 categories of payment, which again, the Torah only mentions a few, but they're derived from the verses. The 5 categories are the damage itself, how much that is valued at, how much that, I don't know how to say this, how much,
It's worth.
not worth, yeah, worth, but like that sounds like it's a good thing, but like how much value of the damage, right? But in a negative way, right? The negative value of the damage. So there's the damage, the pain that the person had, the medical bills, lost wages, and the suffering, the emotional embarrassment, suffering from that. Either way, don't hurt somebody. There you go. It's the moral of the story. Don't hurt somebody. You're on the hook for monetary damage. Torah tells us, though, that if one takes the life of someone, it could be a capital punishment. But if they are strike the other and the other one does not die, thank God, there is a monetary payout. And this becomes the foundation of Jewish criminal law, criminal law and civil law, I guess. There's capital punishments and monetary punishments depending on the case. And again, these are the origins of these types of laws that have now been adopted and accepted in Western societies. The first formulation of this way of thinking is, of course, in Torah, as we know, dating back 3,300 years. All right, jump in. We don't have time. We went a little long on some of the topics in this opening reading, so tomorrow we'll do, please God, 2 and 3 and catch up. Mark, go ahead.
A quick question. This section was preceded with when men will quarrel in Rashi. Actually, it's in Torah 2. So in other words, does all the damages mitigated on people quarreling, not accidental?
Excellent question. Excellent question. The context, beautiful question. The context of this discussion about bodily harm and damages and payments is if two people are fighting. I think the Torah is telling us that even if two people are fighting, and you could say, what happens in a fight happens in a fight, you're still on the hook, let alone a sucker punch. Are you with me? Right. If somebody goes ahead and, God forbid, hurts somebody just out of the blue, of course, even in a case where two people are fighting, and you could say at that point, they're both, maybe it's just a wash, offsetting penalties, whatever happens, happens. In football, I didn't realize this until recently. In football, I'm sorry for going off topic, but it's kind of on topic in my head, at least right now. In football, if there's a play that happens, and let's say the result of the play is, a 50-yard, like a huge play, 50-yard or touchdown, let's take touchdown. But there are penalties, 2 penalties on the play. One is on the offense, one is on the defense. The offensive penalty is like a 5-yard, a minor penalty. The defense is a major penalty. But doesn't matter the severity or minority of the penalty. The penalties, there's 1 and 1, they offset completely, and you just redo everything. The two cancel each other out, and it's done. You don't say, well, one was a more egregious penalty, the other one wasn't. Torah law would say they don't wash that, they don't whitewash each other out. You do look at the nature. So if each one strikes the other, you're on the hook for what you did to the other guy, right? Even if you also got slugged, you're on the hook. It's not a wash. So even in case of quarreling, you're still on the hook. So yeah, excellent point. Now, what about the case? I think you're also asking, what about an accident, right? You didn't meet, it wasn't a fight. It wasn't a sucker punch, right? It was an accident. You were moving your body and you elbowed the other guy in the nose and you broke the nose, right? Or you were, let's say even more, let's say you were sleeping and you moved and I don't know, you were with a buddy in Tampa Bay, you had a hotel room for the Super Bowl, and you knocked and in the sleep, on another bed, but you were sleepwalking, and then you ended up elbowing the guy in the nose, you broke his nose. There's a classic teaching in the Talmud which addresses this that says, Adam muad la'olam. A person is always on the hook. There's never you're not judged as being a terrible guy. It's an accident, but a damage is a damage. You're always on the hook. So, for example, if you're sleeping, giving another example, and in your sleep, you're staying over a friend's house, and your arm knocks over a beautiful Tiffany lamp, if that's a thing, right? I think it is, and it smashes to the floor. I mean, maybe your friend's like no big deal, but legally, you're on the hook for it. You can't say I wasn't aware, I was in my sleep, and it wasn't me. I didn't intend to do it. When it comes to capital cases, there's a different penalty. But when it comes to monetary payments, you did the damage, you're on the hook. It's kind of like a car, right? Your car hit someone. All right, you didn't mean to do it. You did it. You're on the hook. Now, if they did it to you, then they're on the hook. But it's whoever did the damage, whether intentionally or unintentionally. It is what it is. But if you did damage, you got to pay for it. So in all 3 cases, whether there was a fight, a mutual fight, that sounds weird, but whether it's a fight and whatever, or it's a sucker punch, it's a one-sided fight, or it's an accident, if you did the damage, you got to pay for it. Again, it's not a criminal thing because you didn't intend to do it. I mean, not the bar fight might be, or the sucker punch would be, but the other example wouldn't be a criminal thing, but there's still a monetary liability. Anyway, look, there's entire tractates of the Talmud, 3 tractates, I'm looking at my shelf now, 3 entire, that bottom row over there, the gray books, 3 of those massive volumes of Talmud. Actually, no, because those are English. There might be 2 per, whatever, might be 6. 3 volumes of Talmud, Baba Kama, Baba Metzia, Baba Basra. The 3 Babas are about these types of cases, each one a different category. Some is torts and damages, and some is about property law, and some is about other cases of like property dispute and ownership disputes, all from Mishpatim, all from this one Torah portion. the verses are so condensed and so concise, but allude to so many different laws. And the foundation of Jewish civil law, civil and criminal law, is this Torah portion. That's why it's Mishpatim. It's the foundation of civil and criminal law right here. All right, we got a lot more to do tomorrow. And tomorrow I will, please God, pledge to go at a quicker clip. We went a little bit slow today, but I think I got carried away by some of the ideas, some of the topics. So no, it's okay. But tomorrow, as you'll see, almost every verse gives us a new law to talk about. It's like boom, 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 boom. It's not like one topic over the span of 10 verses. It's like 10 verses, 10 different laws. Each one is a world unto itself and could be pages of the Talmud in elaboration. So stay tuned for more excitement, and we'll see you, please God, tomorrow, if not tonight, at the final Judaism and Wealth series. Stay tuned for more action and excitement. I am so excited. I have not mentioned this to anybody yet, but I'm putting the final touches on a new series from a remarkable rabbi, scientist, and futurist. You heard me right, futurist. It's going to be like Kabbalah of science fiction, but not so science fiction. Anyway, I'm still like hammering out and narrowing down the exact title of this two-part series, but check for it in the coming days. It's going to be released and it's going to be pretty remarkable. All right, that's it for today. It's great to see you all. I'm going to let you go. It's getting late. All right, Donna, Ray, Mark, and Sandrine, have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. See you all.
You too.
Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Pleasure. Take care.